Facing the board. This is the one during public comment. Right there. That's me. I got it. Where to
Yeah.
Okay, I take all those t-shirts down there. I hate when such a message being said, oh, Blake said, give me extra one, that was supposed to be Tiana, and I asked you, Jess, why did not give you an extra t-shirt? I guess I'll check. Jack is employing us for not bringing home t-shirts that I brought. No, I asked her to make some. It's $10 shirt. And they both told me they have $12 shirts to get from home.
What did you buy?
Oh, yes.
I know.
Next month, I'm going to use names. And these are specific line items that were increased. But it doesn't address the surplus. Right, when the no, you're right. I see what you're saying.
Sometimes I can keep it.
But one last question. But if we're presenting the meeting, we're discussing with them, right? I guess it's a search, right?
Call to order, please. We could rise for
a pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act, adequate notice has been given of tonight's meeting in the Hunter County Democrat and Express Times, has been posted on the bulletin board by the main office of the Franklin Township School, sent to the Township Clerk and to all Board of Education members, and posted on the school website January 9th, 2025. Can we get a roll call, please?
Mrs. Cummins, Mrs. Pendo, Mr. Giordano,
Here.
Mrs. Nico,
Here.
Mrs. Luciano,
Here.
Mr. Retz,
Here.
Mr. Norton,
Present here.
we have a quorum.
Thank you. Tonight, we want to welcome Mr. Mark Zittimer. He is our general board attorney. We have different attorneys that handle different matters. But he is coming to speak tonight about how the board, A, operates, but B, how we can communicate. That's been one of the goals that this board has had, is to increase communication with the school, with the families, and with the community. And so with new things come change, and we're all learning right now. So I just asked Mr. Zittimer to come speak to us tonight about the nuts and bolts of ethics for school kids.
Good evening, thank you for having me this evening, members of the board, members of the administration, members of the community.
You want better. Thank you.
And you're in charge of the,
And I can do that.
oh, whoever, doesn't matter.
Is it okay? This way you wouldn't mind.
This? Yeah. Sorry that my back is to all of you.
Where it looks is right here.
The change surgery. Thank you. Who's been passed?
Good. So good evening, thanks for having me. As the board president pointed out, we're going to talk this evening about the New Jersey School Ethics Act and some of the related issues that go along with that. So in New Jersey, we have a law called the School Ethics Act. And it's an act that really governs the ethical, I'll say, do's and don'ts for school officials. And I'm going to explain to everybody who is a school official within the meaning of the School Ethics Act. I always like to start, you could go, there we go. Thank you, perfect. I always like to start this presentation by talking a little bit about what the preamble, the opening statement of our School Ethics Act says. And what it says is that in our representative form of government, it's essential that members of local boards of education and school administrators hold the respect and confidence of the people. School officials must avoid conduct which is in violation of the public trust or which creates some justifiable impression among the public that such trust is being violated. What does all that mean? It basically means that the community that elected you has to feel confident that when you take action on a particular matter, when you're involved in a discussion, that you're acting in the best interest of affecting the school district, not your own personal best interest, not in the best interest of a family member, a business that you're associated with. You're here for the people, you're here for the community, you're here for the students, and that's the confidence that the people have to have. And I always tell board members, not only do you have to avoid actual conflicts of interest, but you also have to avoid what I refer to as the appearance of impropriety. If somebody doesn't pass the smell test, if somebody's going to question whether your loyalties are really towards the school district or for some other reason, you need to kind of take a step back and say, is this something that I should be voting on? Is this a discussion that I should be sitting in on? Should I recuse myself? Should we reach out to Mark as our board attorney and get an opinion about whether this is something we should be doing or is this something I should recuse myself in? So that's really a good place to start. And so when you look at the School Ethics Act, and I handed it out to everybody tonight on the PowerPoint, it's basically broken down into two parts. Pull up the slide, thank you. You've got the Code of Ethics within the School Ethics Act, and that only applies to board member conduct. And then you have the Prohibited Acts section. Those deal with conflicts of interest. And so the act applies to school board members. It also applies to officials from the New Jersey School Boards Association and school administrators. Again, the code, next slide please. The Code of Ethics within the Ethics Act only applies to Board of Education member conduct. And I'm going to walk through those sections briefly now. Next slide please. So section A says board members are supposed to basically follow the law. They're supposed to uphold the rules of the State Board of Education, court orders pertaining to the schools, and basically laws that implicate the school district. And as your board attorney, I'm here to help you in terms of interpreting those laws, understanding those laws, and figuring out how they apply to board action. Next. Section B basically says you're supposed to be here for all the children. You're supposed to make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of all kids, regardless of race, creed, religion, sex, social standing, etc. Next. Section C really defines what it is to be a board member. So people say, what does a board member do? A board member is really somebody who sets policy for the school district. So the Code of Ethics says that the role of a board member is policy making, planning for the future and appraisal, taking a step back and saying, how are we doing? And it says you're supposed to only effectuate those plans and policies after consulting with those affected by them. You do that through the administration. You do that through your work on the various committees and so forth. Section D, this is an area where board members frequently get themselves into trouble. Board members are not administrators, right? You hired administration to operate the day-to-day operations of the school district. They run the district, board members don't. The Code of Ethics says the board member's responsibility is not to run the school, but to see that it is well run. Now, there's various provisions of New Jersey code that say if somebody's going to file an ethics violation, what would somebody have to prove, for instance, to show that somebody violated the administration of the school supervision? So somebody would have to show that a board member gave a direct order to school personnel or became directly involved in activities or functions that are the responsibility of school personnel. This is kind of an extreme example, but by the way, all the cases I'm going to talk about tonight, if you go to the New Jersey School Ethics Commission website, they're all there. So I'm giving little snippets of these cases, but if you want to read more about these cases, they're all available online. But here's a pretty extreme example of a board member administering the schools. The SEC, which refers to the School Ethics Commission, found a violation here where a board member on his own showed up at one of the schools and starts demanding that the secretaries in the guidance office start running reports for him. He wants copies of SAT reports, he wants to see scores, and is just pretty much directing everybody in the office via his beck and call. He then proceeds to head down to the school locker room and to the PE class. This is the middle of the school day, by the way, and starts telling the PE teachers how they should do a better job supervising the gym class, then decides he's going to go and conduct an inspection of the school locker room and so forth. So that's an extreme example of where the School Ethics Commission found clearly a board member getting involved in the day-to-day operations of the school district went way beyond the provision of what he should have been doing in terms of policy making, planning, and appraisal. Section E of the Code of Ethics says that you recognize your authority rests with the board, and you're not allowed to take private action, do your own investigations, do your own work outside the scope of this meeting or through your various committees. So you have authority, as you know, when you're here at these meetings, to act, to vote, to express opinions and that sort of thing. But once you leave this room, you do not have any authority outside this room. And that's also codified in your own board policy, 9010. And what your policy says is that board members have authority only when the board is in session. The board should not be bound in any way by action or statements on the part of any individual board member, except when such action is basically authorized by the direction of the Board of Education. So anything outside that is really deemed private action, and it's not sanctioned by the Code of Ethics. And I'm going too quickly, by the way. Please chime in. I'm happy to answer any questions as we go along, and at the end, of course, as well. So section F says you're supposed to refuse to surrender your independent judgment to special interest groups or partisan political groups that are using schools for personal gain or for the gain of friends. I think that's pretty obvious in terms of what that means. When they talk about surrendering, you're going way too fast. When they talk about surrendering your independent judgment, they're not saying that you can't advocate on behalf of a group. That's certainly permissible if you're a special ed parent who happens to be a board member and you want to advocate on behalf of an issue. That's certainly your right. The code in the prior slide talks about the fact that you're not allowed to, you're supposed to refuse to surrender your independent judgment. And what that really means is lose your objectivity in the way you handle a particular matter.
I'm sorry, my friend, I don't mean to interrupt you. Do you have a microphone?
I don't.
Is there any like microphone? Just so we have people listening at home.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That would save my business. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Testing. I don't know. Confidentiality. Is that better? Confidentiality. So you can. Board members have a responsibility to maintain the confidentiality of information that they come across as board members. And as you all know, you've been on the board either a short time or a long time, you're going to come across a lot of confidential information, confidential student information, confidential personnel matters, litigation, matters of attorney-client privilege, and it's essential that you hold that confidential. And I'll provide a little later advice at some point in the meeting about some of these things. But I always tell my board members that if the board as a whole loses trust that what's said in our closed session, where we're allowed to discuss confidential topics, stays in closed session, it really undermines the ability of the board to be an effective body because nobody's going to trust that what they say in that room stays in that room. And it is extremely damaging. I have boards that I represent where they're buttoned up properly so, and what stays in that room, we feel confident at the end of the night is not going to escape. And then I have other boards, quite frankly, where we believe we have leaks because there's no way that when we have a discussion and the community member knows it, the community knows about it, that somebody in that room didn't divulge that information. And like I said, it's extremely damaging because nobody wants to have an open and honest debate anymore for fear that what's said in that room is not going to stay in that room. Thank you, Mark. So you're right. And I was going to get to that point. It's an extremely important point. You've been doing this a long time too. Your spouses, your friends, your kids are not bound by any of this. Okay. And so You shouldn't be sharing information that you learn sitting at the dais in closed session through our committees with family members, spouses, friends. No matter how much they promise you, they're not going to tell anybody. The fact of the matter is there's no such thing as secrets, and we all know that, right? So keep it to yourselves. You can discuss these issues amongst yourselves. That's perfectly acceptable because you're all bound by the same confidentiality, but it shouldn't go beyond the people that are sitting at this table here this evening. Accuracy. Go back, please. I'm going to blame you, Mark, if people say that I'm talking too fast. Section G has to do with accuracy. So board members also have to provide accurate information. And I'll talk a little bit later on about your free speech rights and your free speech parameters. But the fact of the matter is, when you speak about board member issues, whether you're here, whether you're communicating with the community and so forth, it's important that what you say is true and accurate. And if you're not sure, you shouldn't say it at all. You're allowed to say, for instance, I'm voting against the budget this year because we're adding 5 new administrative positions, if that's a true statement. It would be unethical to say I'm voting against the budget this year because we're adding 10 new administrative positions if that statement were not accurate. So accuracy is another very key provision of Section G. Next. Section H. Now, board members have to remember they cannot appoint a staff member in the school district without the superintendent's recommendation by law. All personnel actions have to be approved upon the recommendation of the superintendent. And that's why many agendas say, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, we're appointing somebody, we're terminating somebody, we're transferring somebody. All personnel has to be upon the superintendent's recommendation. Is there an exception to that one rule where the board can appoint somebody without the superintendent's recommendation? Who's going to get a star tonight with that? I'm going to keep you out of it, but go ahead. What'd you say? Yes, well, the superintendent themselves, but the board still would have to vote on it. The example that I'm giving is, can the board ever appoint somebody without the superintendent's recommendation?
Well, I'll take the no.
No? Does anybody think yes? All right, Mark, you can.
I'll take the yes.
You'll take the yes. The answer is yes. Do you know?
I'm saying superintendent, but you clarify.
No, the answer is everybody familiar with a Donaldson hearing?
Oh, yeah.
So a Donaldson hearing is if a staff member in a school district is not renewed by the superintendent, the board doesn't vote on non-renewals. Their names just don't appear on the agenda. But a staff member who is not renewed has an opportunity to come before the Board of Education in closed session or in public, depending on the will of the employee, to try to convince the board to offer the employee a contract over the recommendation of the superintendent. It's the only time the board can appoint somebody without the superintendent's recommendation. It's called a Donaldson hearing, and it comes from a case called Donaldson versus, I forget the name of the other party, but that's the only time that the board can actually appoint somebody without the superintendent's recommendation. Next. Section I, I will support and protect school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. Does that mean we rubber stamp everything that comes our way from the administration? No, but it means you're not allowed to publicly evaluate the superintendent. You're not allowed to evaluate our staff in a public arena. Staff members who you wish to discuss in closed session or to get a RICE notice. Everybody familiar with a RICE notice? And if you don't know, there's no shame in any of this. So, okay. So you know that staff member is entitled to know that there's going to be a discussion and they have a right to compel that discussion into public if they want. And so an example of somebody violating this would be that somebody would have to show that a board member took deliberate action which resulted in undermining, opposing, compromising, or harming school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. One case that always comes to mind in this example is an extreme example of a board member who posted a picture of the superintendent on Facebook. And when you clicked on the superintendent's picture, it said, here's the individual who destroys dreams and burns futures. And again, it linked to a picture of the superintendent's picture on the website. That was an extreme example of a board member not supporting and protecting school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. And no, it was not Dr. Calabro. Okay. Next. So Section J, I like Section J for board members. To me, this is a great section for board members when you're at the local supermarket and a parent comes up to you and complains that their child's teacher is giving too much homework or the school play got canceled because of snow or whatever it is. Board members are supposed to refer complaints to the chief school administrator. You're not supposed to act on those complaints. You're not supposed to handle those complaints. I will refer all complaints to the chief administrative officer and act on those complaints at a public meeting only after the failure of an administrative solution. In other words, the superintendent didn't address it in any way. Not that the superintendent didn't address it in a way that you felt was appropriate, but that the superintendent didn't address it at all. And I've never seen an example where a board member actually was in their rights to try to address a matter publicly, because in 99.9% of the cases that at least I've ever dealt with, the administration does get back to people, does handle these cases. There's also nothing wrong, by the way, with a board member referring somebody to the chain of command. If you're in the supermarket and somebody's complaining about their child's teacher, it's okay to say, hey, have you spoken to the teacher? Did you go to the principal? Like, I'm a board member, with all due respect, and I'm a policymaker. I'm not really getting involved in the day-to-day. So it's also okay to refer community members to the chain of command as well. Next. So if somebody believes that somebody violated the prohibited acts, which deal with conflicts of interest, and you have those in front of you, or if somebody believes that a board member violated the code of ethics, who can file a complaint? And the answer is anybody. Anybody in the community, a fellow board member, anybody can file a complaint. There is a 6-month statute of limitations, which means you have to file that complaint within 6 months or it's time barred. It used to be a year, but I think the School Ethics Commission was getting so many complaints, they actually shortened the window of time to make it 6 months. Who knows, maybe next year it'll be down to 3 months. I don't know, but they keep narrowing that window of time. The Board of Education as an entity cannot file a complaint, but individual board members could if they wish to do so. Next slide, please. The School Ethics Commission is ultimately the only entity that can determine whether a board member's conduct violates the School Ethics Act. They're part of the Department of Education. Does anybody know who comprises the School Ethics Commission? And I'm not asking you for names in particular, but does anybody know who it's composed of, how they get on the School Ethics Commission? Anybody know? Anybody? So there's 9 members on the School Ethics Commission. They're appointed by the governor. You've got 5 public citizens who sit on the School Ethics Commission. You've got 2 administrators from school districts, again, appointed by the governor. And you've got 2 board members who also sit on the School Ethics Commission, comprised of 9 folks. And the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General from the state, also sits there. That person is the lawyer who advises the School Ethics Commission. Generally speaking, the School Ethics Commission doesn't actually hear cases. If they feel that there are factual issues in dispute, or if they feel there's probable cause that a board member violated the School Ethics Act, what they will do is they will assign the case to an administrative law judge who will have a regular hearing, a trial, where the case is adjudicated. The person alleging that a board member violated the Code of Ethics has the burden of proof. So if you're going to file a complaint against a board member, you have to prove that case essentially in a court of law. The judge's decision is what's called an initial decision. It then goes back to the School Ethics Commission to give the thumbs up or the thumbs down. So that's kind of the process in terms of filing these complaints. In my experience, if the case isn't dismissed outright, which is common, sometimes these cases can take literally years from beginning to end to get adjudicated. If there's going to be a trial, it involves briefs. It's very, very involved. Advisory opinions. So like I said before, you can certainly consult me about any questions that come up. If you have a question about a particular course of action, whether you should or shouldn't do something, feel free as board counsel through the board president to reach out to me, and I'm happy to provide an opinion. I've read most of the decisions from the School Ethics Commission. But we can also go to the School Ethics Commission and ask for an advisory opinion. We can ask, and it's supposed to be about prospective conduct. So you'd write a letter to the School Ethics Commission and say, Dear School Ethics Commission, I'm a board member. My sister is being recommended for a position in the district. Can I vote on that? And they'll give you an advisory opinion on that. The only time I've ever actually had to go to the School Ethics Commission, just a very unique case I had in one of the districts I represent. It's a K-12 district where a senior student literally got on the Board of Education. His senior year got elected to the Board of Education. And the board president called me and said, Mark, can this person vote on his own teachers? Can he vote on student discipline matters? And just threw up a lot of really interesting questions. And I scratched my head and I said, you know something, this is a good case for us to go to the School Ethics Commission and get an advisory. And they issued a great opinion, kind of spelling out all the do's and don'ts. And it gave us a nice roadmap forward in terms of how to handle some of the issues that arose with respect to that board member student, who turned out to be a great board member, and he graduated and continued on after he graduated as well. So anyway, next slide. So what are the sanctions? If somebody violates the School Ethics Act or the Code of Ethics, a reprimand is a written letter from the School Ethics Commission to the board member, basically slap on the wrist saying you shouldn't have done that. A censure is a resolution that we have to read publicly at a meeting admonishing the board member or the school official for violating the act. Suspension is exactly what it sounds like. It's removal from the Board of Education for a set period of time. And then lastly is removal, like literal removal from the Board of Education. Can you file an ethics case against a board member who's no longer on the board? What do you think? Yep. Exactly. As long as it's within the 6 months, you can still file a complaint. Now, obviously, suspension or removal is not going to be an option, but you can as long as it's within that 6-month window of time. Next. So I mentioned before, you don't lose your free speech rights as a board member. Nobody would ever run for a board if you lost your right to speak, but there's constraints, there's limitations. And so, for instance, what the cases from the School Ethics Commission say is that board members shouldn't represent their own personal individual opinions as the opinion of the Board of Education. You shouldn't speak on behalf of the Board of Education unless you've been authorized to do so, and I'll talk in a minute about who is the spokesperson for the Board of Education. So in statements, posts on social media, if you're somebody who likes to post a lot, there should be a disclaimer. And there should be a statement basically saying that although I'm a member of the board, I'm speaking now as an individual citizen, a private citizen, and these represent my own personal opinions and not those of the Board of Education. And I'm going to, in the PowerPoint, you have it there as well. I have the model language that the School Ethics Commission recommends that when you post or you speak or you write a letter to a newspaper, that you use that disclaimer language. Now, that disclaimer language is not a bulletproof shield. Just because you use the disclaimer, it doesn't mean it's a license to go absolutely crazy saying, oh, see, I had the disclaimer. There are limitations you still need to follow, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We also have this codified in Board Policy 9020, and it says that board members should emphasize to the media that they can only speak as private citizens unless empowered by the board to speak for it when asked to speak as a board member. So like I said, the board can certainly authorize, if a board member is going to a meeting in town, we can authorize our members to speak on behalf of the board, but again, it has to be authorized. Next. So here's the model language that the School Ethics Commission recommends when you post, when you write a letter, when you give a speech, and that's that the following statements are made by me in my capacity as a private citizen and not in my capacity as a board member. These statements are also not representative of the board or its individual members and solely represent my own personal opinion. The idea is that you don't want people in the community to get confused. Is Mr. Giordano speaking now? Is Mr. Giordano the board member, or is he speaking as Mr. Giordano, a private citizen? And that's the purpose of having that. It's to make it very clear to the community in what capacity, what hat you're wearing when you're making those speeches or posting or whatever you're doing. Next. Communicating with the public, and the board president spoke a little bit about this before. We have some policy, and this is a policy issue. We've set policy on who speaks to the public, who's the spokesperson, how our communication is supposed to work with the media, and what our policy says is that the board president is the spokesperson for the Board of Education. And that's very common in all the districts I represent. The board president is the spokesperson for the board. And it says the board president, only the board president should authorize or make statements of official board positions. It then goes on to say that the chief school administrator, the superintendent, is kind of the conduit, the middle person with the media, between the board and the media. So when a community member sends an email to the entire board, who should respond to that email? The general rule is that if we're going to respond, and not every community email necessitates a response, but if we're going to respond and it's sent to the entire board, the board president should be the one who responds to those emails. Now, if a community member emails individual board members, my advice is that the individual reach out to the board president and say, hey, I got an email from a community member. Should I respond? Should I not respond? I want to respond. Here are some of the things I'm thinking about. And there should be that open line of communication. The board president, if there's going to be a response, should certainly be copied on that. If it involves a personnel issue, for instance, I would always recommend that the superintendent be copied on that response too. Because what we want to make sure of is that when community members email board members, that they're not getting mixed messages. You know, they may send individual board member emails to all of you, and if everybody's responding in a different way, it could cause confusion. So that's why I always believe getting the board president involved and try to speak, if possible, with a unified message. It doesn't mean we always have to agree on everything, but making sure that we're not, more importantly, giving inconsistent information to our community is extremely important. Next. So in communicating with the public, you have to remember the ethical limitations that I've talked about so far. Referring complaints to the chief school administrator, making sure that when we communicate with the public, we're providing accurate information, that we're not divulging confidential information, that we're not administering the schools. Like I said before, it's perfectly acceptable and probably a good practice to refer community members to the chain of command. Board members really shouldn't be involved in solving community member individual issues, especially involving their own children. And the last thing that's important to remember is you should always be using your board member email accounts. We all have board member email accounts. And I always tell board members that if community members have your mobile phones and they like to text you about board issues, direct them to your board email account. And that's the way the communication should be going for a couple reasons. Emails between board members and even the community about board business are public records. And we have an obligation to maintain, not destroy, public records. So if you get a text message and you're communicating with each other or a member of the community and you delete that, technically you're destroying a public record. The reason I like using the email account that's issued by the school district is we have tech folks, we maintain all that stuff on our servers, and you don't have to worry about it. And then when we get OPRA requests, sometimes we get OPRA, Open Public Records Act requests for emails. It's easy because then the custodian of record directs our technology people just to go into your emails and find the emails that may satisfy those parameters. And then the custodian of records will typically involve me in reviewing whether we should or shouldn't be disclosing those emails, depending on the subject matter. If they involve a confidential legal matter, obviously we're not going to disclose those emails. But if it's an email between two board members about the budget, that may be something that we will have to disclose. So that's something that oftentimes involves attorney review as well. But the point is, don't use your Gmail accounts, don't use text messages. And a lot of board members think, well, if I use my Gmail account, then I don't have to worry about any of this. That's not true. The case law is very clear that whether you're communicating through text or whether you're communicating with a Gmail account, if it pertains to the issue of the school district, board issues, board matters, it doesn't matter which email account you're using. It's going to be a public record, and then we'll have to figure out whether an exception to disclosure applies. The other thing you have to remember also is that we want to avoid a majority of the board members going back and forth by email, because somebody could say, hey, they're really having a meeting without the public by going back and forth on an issue. So it's perfectly acceptable for the board president to send an email to the entire board. But when it gets problematic is when you start replying to all, and before you know it, the board's having a whole discussion about whatever it is by email. So that's something that should be avoided. You can certainly email through your committees, right? Back and forth between less than a quorum is perfectly fine. It's once you start adding that fourth person, you're a 7-member board, once you start adding that fourth person, then we have to be really careful, because the public by law has a right to witness those deliberations, and they can't witness deliberations that are going back and forth by email. Does that make sense? Okay. So I always like to do a little quiz, and I'm not going to call on anybody, but let me get your opinions. These are some of the latest and greatest cases from the School Ethics Commission that came out this year. These are true or false questions. So what do you think about this first one? A board member is permitted to review the resumes of candidates who are within the candidate pool for a position that was being recommended by the superintendent. So the agenda comes out, board sees that the superintendent's recommending Sally Smith to be the new phys ed teacher. Does the board member have a right to say, hey, Dr. Calabro, I'd like to come in and look at the application of that person. I'd like to come in and look at the resume. True or false? Anybody think false? Mark, can you hit the button? Let's see. Let's see if this works. True. Excellent. You're right. True. Because like I said before, the board has to vote to appoint the best qualified person after considering the recommendation of the superintendent. You have a right to see the credentials of the person that you're being asked to vote upon. Okay. All right. We're 1 for 1. Number 2, a board member violated Section D of the Act, and this is why I handed this out. This has to do with the Prohibited Acts section. Section D says, you will carry out your responsibility not to, I'm sorry, that's the Code of Ethics. Section D, no school official shall undertake any employment or service, whether compensated or not, which might reasonably be expected to prejudice his independence of judgment in the exercise of his official duty. So here's the scenario. Did a board member violate that provision when he continued to serve as a volunteer football coach after being appointed by the board until the football season ended, which was approximately 2 months after he became a board member. So board member is a volunteer coach. There's a vacancy on the board. The board appoints that particular volunteer coach to be the new board member. And he continues to serve as a volunteer football coach for a couple months after the time he was appointed to the Board of Education. Do you think that that's a violation, true or false, not a violation? True. Anybody disagree with Mr. Naughton? Oh, go ahead, Shauna.
Shame, that's a fault.
Sorry,
It was a
yeah.
fault. It's all right, long night. I only correct it sometimes. Is it the school's football team?
Yes, the school's football team.
False. False. I'm going with false.
Okay, we heard some falses, we heard a true. Let's see the answer, Mark. True.
Darn it!
Good job. So let me ask you a question. Are board members allowed to volunteer in other capacities? Can a board member be a PTO president? Can a board member go into a classroom and read a book to kids? Can a board member be involved in building the set for the school play? What do you think? Do you lose your ability to volunteer because you're a board member? No, you don't. But there's limitations. And what the School Ethics Commission says is the answer to this question, and all the questions, the examples I just gave, depends on how much interaction you have with students and staff. If you have significant oversight, interaction with students and staff, it's going to be a problem. You're a volunteer football coach. You're very involved. But in the other examples I gave where a board member wanted an advisory opinion because he was helping building a set for the school play, they said, that's perfectly fine. You're standing, you're behind the stage, hammering wood. It's not like you're giving direct orders to people and that sort of thing. So the level of interaction is really the guidepost for the answer to this question and other questions about volunteering. Okay, next. I'll count that as a 2 for 2, by the way. A board member violated sections B. So when a board member or somebody files a complaint under the School Ethics Act or the Code of Ethics, it's up to the person filing the complaint to identify what provisions of the Act or the Code of Ethics they believe is violated. So did a board member violate sections B and G of the School Ethics Act, the prohibited acts, and sections C, D, F, and J of the Code of Ethics? When she picked, is a little complicated, but she picks up the letter from the home of a friend who was going to be discussed by the board in closed session. The friend was also an employee of the school district who was riced and was going to be discussed. And the employee says to the board member, hey, I got a letter I'd like you to hand out to everybody. So the board member goes to the employee's home, picks up the letter, gives it to the business administrator and asks him to make copies for the entire board, but not the superintendent, and then questions the superintendent's position regarding the employee's actions in executive session. Do you think that's a problem?
Yeah.
Does anybody think that was okay? No, that was absolutely unacceptable, and so you're right, that was a true. And what the School Ethics Commission said in the case was that if respondent believed that her friend needed assistance, respondent, meaning the board member, could have picked up the letter, delivered it to the superintendent as required, and then recused herself from the matter so the board and the superintendent could have discussed it without respondent's influence following her direct involvement on a close friend's discipline matter. However, respondent instead advocated on behalf of her friend, questioned the superintendent's motives, and more importantly and specifically requested the superintendent not receive a copy of the letter. Respondent personally represented her friend's interest in the matter before the board and even further attempted to influence the proceeding by privately giving the letter to the board and not to the superintendent. So that was a big no-no here. How about the next one? A board member violated Section E of the code, which is that you're recognizing your authority rests with the board and not making personal promises or taking private action that could compromise the board. So here, a board member texts a staff member who she's friends with, also different case, but she says to the staff member, did you ever receive a Rice notice? If not, I could accuse the board president or secretary or chief school administrator of malfeasance if you did not receive the notice and they want to discuss you. Anybody think that was okay? No, that was also hugely problematic. Basically, trying to undermine the superintendent, the board president, the BA, and so forth. Next one. A board member violated Section A and C of the Code of Ethics when he voted against amending the board agenda to swear in a new board member who the board had previously agreed was going to fill a vacant seat. So let me explain what's going on here. The board has interviews for a vacant seat. The board agrees in closed session that at the next meeting, they're going to appoint John Doe to fill the seat. The next meeting rolls around. Somebody makes a motion to amend the agenda so that we can swear in John Doe at that meeting. and a board member votes against that, and somebody files an ethics complaint saying that the board member violated section A and C, A being that you're going to uphold and enforce laws and rules, and section C is confining your board action to policy making, planning, and appraisal. Does anybody think that what that board member did in voting no was problematic here, or was that okay? What do you think? True violation or false, not a violation?
False.
False. Anybody think true? All right, Mark. Let's see what the answer is. And it was false. That's exactly right. And I want to just read from the case. There's lots of cases actually out there where people file ethics complaints against board members for how they vote, voting against curriculum, voting against whatever it is. Sometimes the community doesn't like that board members vote no to things. And the question is that a violation? And the answer is it's not. And what the School Ethics Commission says in this case and lots of others, it says board members are permitted to vote in accordance with their beliefs, and as such, it is within respondents' prerogative to vote against amending a meeting agenda, including one regarding swearing in a board member who may not be eligible to serve. Accordingly, by voting no, respondents did not take board action to effectuate policies and plans without consulting those affected them or taking action unrelated to their duties as a Board of Education member. So you're allowed to vote no. It's not an ethics violation. Next. So a board member in this particular case owns a spiritware company, okay? So the question is, did the board member violate C of the Prohibited Act conflict of interest provision when he sent emails to the school principal asking him to send emails to students and families to promote the sale of the spiritware from his company, even though he actually donated the stuff to the community? Do you think it was a problem for him to be basically sending emails to the principal saying, hey, make sure you get all this information on this spiritware? What do you think? You think it's a problem? Why? Anybody want to elaborate? Or? He was a board member, but he was also acting in his capacity as an owner as well. So why do you think that's a problem? Somebody might say, well, he's donating it. What's the big deal? What do you see as the problem?
Based off of your relationship with the board.
Yeah.
There you go. That's exactly right.
Business.
Yep, and like I said at the beginning, this appearance of impropriety. It may not be an actual conflict, but does it pass the smell test? Is somebody going to say, look, I understand he's donating all this stuff, but isn't he really promoting his business, getting a little plum here? He has an advantage because he's a board member and has the ability to email the principal. People in the community that own businesses that may want to donate their stuff maybe don't have that type of advantage. So they found that was problematic, certainly. How about next? So go ahead, Mark, please. True. And how about number 7? Did a board member violate section D, E, and I of the code? D being responsibility not to administer the schools, I being supporting and protecting school personnel, and E, recognizing your authority rests with the board and not making personal promises or taking private action. So did a board member violate those provisions when he publicly stated at a board meeting about a planned referendum project? I'm going to continue to repeat this loud and clear so the taxpayers can hear this. I encourage our community to vote no on this. I encourage them to come talk to other board members and tell them to back off. Problem or not a problem? You said problem, Dr. Calabro. Why do you say that?
Well, because he's influencing them to talk to other board members. I think he's going beyond, not just the fact that he's explaining his point of view and now saying, oh, probably to make other people to think like I think.
It was done at a public board meeting.
I don't know what the whole context of this looks like, but I encourage our community to vote no on this. Isn't in and of itself problematic.
Right.
I encourage them to talk to other board members.
That's what I
That's
think
what
the
I
problem is. Yeah, that's right.
That's
what I would think.
I also encourage our community to talk with people other than myself, though, when they come to speak with me.
So you think this was okay? Protected speech, totally fine.
The way it's written is not fine. If there was
That's a
edits,
verbatim.
It would be okay.
Okay, how would you clean it up?
I would get rid of the tell them to back off. And I would maybe say, actually, I don't think I would really say any of that other than, I would encourage people to attend public meetings about this or coffee with Dr. Calabro.
I mean,
So
I
I'm
wouldn't
gonna-
phrase it that way, but
Yeah.
I'm not finding where
This is a tricky one.
His statement.
Anybody think it's perfectly fine?
It could be.
It feels like there's a sentence before and after that would add context to it, to Shayna's point. But at the risk of going out on the edge, that seems like an individual who's stating their individual opinions about the matters that are going on.
So you think it's a false?
I think it's false.
I think it's a false, but I think it's ill-advised. But to me, if someone said that to me, they're not saying that the board's saying it, that this is what's happening, that they're not getting any information. They're saying, I encourage you to talk to someone, and the back off line really is the tag that makes it a little heavy. But I'll go out on a limb and say false.
I'm gonna say false. I think there might be a red herring.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark. Let's see the answer, please.
Give your answer first.
It was a false. It was not a violation. We talked about free speech rights, telling people that they don't think they should support the referendum and encourage your board members to vote no. It's protected speech. I agree. I think what you said, Matt, it feels wrong. It's ill-advised, I think were your words.
It's not good bedside manner.
Not good bedside manner. Like I said, healthy dialogue and debate among board members is a good thing, right? It leads to good decision-making, but it should be done in a way that's respectful. And I think it loses a little bit of the respect here. I think here's what the School Ethics Commission said. That's respondent opined during a public meeting that taxpayers should vote against the planned facilities referendum. His statement did not contain any personal promises, nor is it action beyond the scope of his duties as a board member that had the potential to compromise the board. As a public meeting is the appropriate place for board members to have discussions, right? But some might argue, hey, isn't that what board members are supposed to do? We're voted to influence each other. We're voted to influence the public, and I'm allowed at a meeting to express my opinions and to disagree with my fellow board members. If this was done on social media, I'd really scratch my head. I'd say it's a problem. Maybe it's private action outside the scope of your duties. But even if somebody posted on social media, I'm voting against the referendum, you'd certainly need that disclaimer that we talked about, that it's clear that you're speaking as an individual at that point and not at a board. This is kind of a safe space, if you will. And like I said, it doesn't give you free rein to violate confidentiality, inaccuracy, supporting and protecting school personnel. Those are all things you always have to be mindful of. But dialogue, debate, discussion, disagreement is all proper. And so you guys had great answers to these questions. You made you think a little bit about some of them. And I read a lot of these cases, and sometimes when I read them and I kind of feel the decision's going to go one way, it's not, well, it happens where I'm surprised by the result. But if you read a lot of these cases, a lot of them do get dismissed right out of the gate. The School Ethics Commission scrutinizes these very carefully when they first get these complaints because, like I said, in cases that there's factual disputes or there's questions about whether there's a violation, it's a very long and involved process. And I think the School Ethics Commission wants to be sure that when they send these cases to a judge, that they have some degree of merit. This one I could have seen going to a judge possibly. But at the end of the day, they found it was not a violation. So does anybody have any questions about anything I discussed this evening?
I had one. You said rice needs to be sent out even when we go to executive session and closed session if a personnel is discussed?
So if we're going to discuss individual staff members.
Positions or?
Positions, no. Positions, no. But if Dr. Calabro says, look, we had a teacher today engage in some serious unbecoming conduct, and I want to discuss the staff member with that board member, if that person didn't get a rice notice 48 hours before the meeting saying, hey, the board is going to be discussing you, I would tell you could not have that discussion. It would be improper. But in a more general sense, personnel, we lost $2 million in our budget, and we're thinking about cutting, X number of positions. That wouldn't require a rice notice if you're not talking about individuals. Yeah. And the rice notice, by the way, just to refresh everybody's memory, it doesn't give the employee the right to come into your closed session. What it gives is the employee the right to compel the discussion into public. They're waiving their rights to privacy. And I've had board members call me and say, because it's happened, believe it or not, where a staff member will actually say, I want that discussion about me in public, because the staff member wants to hear what's said. And then the board members feel funny because now, we've got the audience sitting here and we're about to discuss a staff member in a way that's perhaps not the most flattering. But that's the staff member's right. It's their right to have the discussion privately, and they don't get to partake or to listen if we discuss it publicly.
Adverse action only, or?
Generally adverse action, yeah, generally adverse action. So Mark's point was, if we're gonna talk about giving a teacher, perhaps Teacher of the Year award, would that require a rice notice? I would say it depends. If we're gonna start getting into the employee's employment history and the good and the bad, I would probably err on the side of giving the staff member a rice notice in that scenario. I would always err on a rice notice. If there's any.
They get nervous when they get it right.
They do. I have some districts that I represent, this time of year, they will rice the entire staff for every meeting. I don't always love that, but some districts do that. They figure better safe than sorry, we're going to rice everybody.
And then just for my own education, if we riced someone, would the board be aware of that? We'd be made.
Yes, the board should be.
You two would be the one to do it, but we would be told that these specific people.
There's an ethics case where a board member sent a rice notice to a staff member. That's a no-no. Board members don't get to rice staff members.
All by themselves with no one else.
Correct.
I just up and rice.
Yes, I decided, hey, I'm going to speak about the gym coach today. I'm going to send a rice. Yes, there's crazy cases. Yes, I know. The board president has the ability to rice the superintendent. The board majority, as a majority, you can say, Dr. Calabro, we'd like a staff member rice because we heard some things and we want to have an in-depth discussion. That's proper. But individual board members don't get to rice staff members. Rice notices usually are generated because it's personnel from the superintendent. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on. Come on. Am I on? You have to bring the mic. So moving on, if we could get a motion for section 6 for A and B. Luciano, can we get a second?
A second.
Okay, so we have the approval of the minutes and the approval of the newspaper. This is because the Hunterdon Democrat is no longer running print or digital ads, and we are mandated to notify the public of any meetings. Is it on? It's on. I don't know.
Does mine work?
There we go, sorry. Now is it working?
I think you're.
There we go.
I can't.
Okay, so better? Hello, okay. So this is for approval of the minutes from last month, but also the designation of the official newspaper. The Hunterdon Democrat is no longer in business, so they're not running print ads or digital ads. Therefore, we had to switch where we post our future meetings, so Hunterdon Review, Express Times, Star Ledger. So A and B, first vote. All in favor? All opposed? Any abstentions? Passes. Correspondence, we had no official correspondence. And next we have the school business administrator report. Mr. Kramer.
One board member out of the 7 has not started their personal disclosure forms. I didn't point anybody out. One of the 7 board members did not do their personal disclosure forms. I ask that you do quickly so that we can get that off our list of follow-up. Also, there are 3 board members who have not done the required training. I believe it's down to 2, but I haven't verified the 1. So if the other 2 board members can quickly get that done, that would be greatly appreciated. The Finance Committee met, and the committee chair will be reporting on the specifics of the meeting. We have several resolutions tonight. A, B, C, and D are the monthly ones, which relate to the financial report, the budget transfers for February, and the February bill list. Letter D is the use of facilities. There is a resolution to approve the transportation contract with Warren County Special Service District. We did not use them last year, but we do process this because it requires county approval, and it's there just in case there is a need to use them. During the budget process, even though the budget itself is not on tonight's agenda, we are required to approve a travel resolution, and that resolution relates to that requirement. We also have two resolutions that relate to the Hunterdon County Service Commission. One relates to miscellaneous services. There's a rate sheet. We don't anticipate using it, but it's there so that the board has given the authorization. If there's a need to use any of the services on that rate sheet, we would be able to do it during the 25-26 year, as well as the professional agreement. Our intent is no longer to use paraprofessionals from outside agencies, but if there is a need, the approval will be in place so that the district can use that agency for paraprofessionals. Energy audit is delayed still. They're waiting for the software to be completed. It seems like it's very close, but that's what happened. That's what I've said for the last 2 months. So once it's updated, I'm understanding the report will be almost immediately available after. The 2026 budget being, okay, let me reword that. The 26 budget is being delayed until we have a special board meeting on March 17. So be aware, there is a special board meeting on March 17 to approve the tentative budget to go to the county office. The delay was due to multiple factors. One main one was the preschool aid. There is a mistake that is not fixed, but they're saying for us to move forward with the budget, and they will fix it sometime after the tentative budget is submitted to the state. There was a incorrect calculation on Chapter 44, which pertains to health benefits, and we're still working on getting that adjusted. That ends my report. Any questions or comments? We're good. Thank you.
Mark, did you say that we won't have a response back from the state on?
Correct.
Mark's just writing wrong stuff.
Because all the settings are different from the play. So
You're doing a great job.
Louder out here because it's meant to be, the mics are meant to be on stage, so.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And next we have the superintendent report.
And I just have a list of our security and fire drills. They're really challenging when it's cold outside, but we have to do them. So you make sure that the kids all have their coats on before we go out there.
Thank you. Okay, and then I've added in a new section for President's Report just to increase communication from the board to the school, to the public, to the community. So this year, the board has made it a priority to increase transparency and communication with the town and the school. Hopefully, community members have noticed the changes. We've gotten some good feedback, so thank you. Thank you to Mr. Zittimer for providing a thorough explanation of how board members can communicate with the public and what restrictions we are legally bound by. So to reiterate, the best way to communicate with the board is through email or board emails. We know that we're accessible through other ways, but it's just easiest if you contact us through the board email. Regarding the budget, we are aiming to be as transparent as possible. This board is exploring every possible option to reduce cost and increase revenues. The Finance and Facilities Committee is creating a corporate sponsorship program to increase funding through local companies. Attempting to, we're working with our attorney on all the regulations surrounding that. We're coordinating with other districts in the area to reduce costs for special ed, attempting to reduce costs for special ed and budgeting. We are asking the administration to minimize costs that have the least impact on student success and safety. The anticipated asks of our administration is going to cause change, and it's not easy. We realize that when making staffing changes and school changes, We understand it's not easy, but our duty is to stay committed to the success of the school and at the same time maintain our fiduciary duty towards the taxpayers. So for the board, one of the first pages on your desk, tax levy and extraordinary expenses. Administration has compiled data, and I put together the past 5 years to demonstrate to the school, the staff, and the community why we are in the financial situation that we are currently in. The data set only includes increased costs in 4 areas: salary, employee benefits, transportation, and special education. This doesn't account for inflation, cost of living, anything beyond those 4 categories. Over the past 5 years, 5 years only, the increased cost, not what we're paying, but the increase in those 4 areas is $3,577,509. Meanwhile, the boards of education at Franklin have only voted to increase the tax levy and accounts for $972,000. So the levies that we're working with have only made up 27% of the increased cost in those 4 areas. We know COVID funding was used to cover some of these costs through the grants, but those were one-time grants that should have never been used for recurring expenses such as these categories. You can't use a grant to cover increase in salaries. It doesn't work. As Mark said, the state erred when they sent out our budget numbers, so unfortunately we can't vote on the resolution for the tax levy tonight. I'm sure it's going to come up. I was shocked at these numbers. Last year, we had an increase in those 4 areas of 1.1 million. The year before, 631,000. 22 to 23, 956,000. 21 to 22, 681,000. And then COVID year was only 122,000. So of the 3.5 million in increased cost in those just 4 areas, special education accounted for 1.7 million, which is 49%. That's not our budget. That's how much it's increased. Mind-blowing. Increased salaries was number 2 at 28%, just over $1 million. So I encourage this board to consider all options moving forward. This is not sustainable. We can't make it work this way. We're going to have to make changes. The glaring area is special ed, 1.7 million increased costs. We've got to do something. I don't know if the board wants to discuss reopening the regionalization conversations, but this is definitely something that we have to be honest about, and I can't even say get ahead of it. At this point, we're behind the ball. We're behind the 8 ball. So I encourage conversations, ideas, brainstorming, anything like that. Some of the board members had asked for the administration to provide scenarios as far as potential tax levy increases. So with bank cap and the adjustments for enrollment and healthcare, things of that nature, we can go up to 7.55%. Is that the final amount, Mark?
Pending on chapter 44 could even go higher, but administration right now is saying we won't unless the board is asking us to.
Okay. So at 7.55% tax increase, you have the lists here. These are not set in stone. These are numbers to make scenarios work.
Can I ask, oh, I don't have the mic. I'm just going to talk loudly. Not necessarily now, because I don't want to interrupt your section, but at some point, I would like to have a board discussion about if Chapter 44 funding cuts are decreased, how would the board like to use that funding? Would we like to take that 7.55 higher, or do we intend to carry over? I want to make sure we have an intentional and purposeful discussion around that potential. Because I don't want to just carry it over because we didn't talk about it.
When do you anticipate receiving that response?
I've gotten acknowledgement about maybe 45,000 they're agreeing with. We sent the rest of the documentation today. It's possible tomorrow morning we'll know, but I would hope no later than Wednesday, I would know. If I'm understanding Mrs. Cummins, are you saying that you would like to use that to bring back additional things that we're anticipating to reduce? And I think the number, if you do use it and not reduce bank cap, you're gonna be about 9.5% if I
In
remember.
totality with 124, I don't think we're gonna get the full 124 back, right?
I think there's a good chance we'll get the majority of it back, but I have to wait.
Even better. My point was, I want to have a discussion about that. Like, I want an intentional and purposeful discussion by this group of 7 about that, because I appreciate that 9+% is jarring. But I also want us to have had that discussion.
Can we have a discussion now so I know how to do the budget when I present it on Monday?
I'm sorry, Mark. I'm not trying to throw you for a loop.
No, it's just, if you're gonna
I
have
want to have every discussion tonight that we have to do, so that you are ready to go and we're procedurally voting on the 17th. I don't want you redoing budget on the night of the 17th into the 18th. So all I was asking Caroline is, can we sometime tonight have that discussion? If the money comes back, do we want to carry it over? If it is eligible for carryover, or do we want to bring back some more?
we would be allowed to roll it over one more year, and after next year, if we don't use it, you lose it, yes.
Okay.
And
I wasn't advocating left or right, I was asking for discussion. That's out there.
Yeah, and I think it's the best thing to do, because the community isn't aware of what is at stake of being lost right now. And so we need to be very clear about, we could lose all of these things, or we could minimize how much we're losing. So I would appreciate if you would go all the way up to the max and all the way down to the min, just so we can make the most educated decision. Go up to 9%. Go up to the max that's approved.
Do the whole thing tonight, discussion-wise, so that you don't have to do it again on the 17th.
Okay, so Monday, whatever we're able to tax, you want that as part of the resolution. And just to remind the board, the resolution is to approve the tax levy and any adjustments that are allowed and any surplus being used. That's what you're doing.
Correct. And I'm not asking that you do that. I'm asking that we have the conversation tonight. That's all.
So can we have a discussion so I know what I'm doing? Okay, start the conversation.
I can start the conversation. If we're diving into it, the issue I have with this scenario breakdown.
Okay, these are just examples. Yeah, these are just examples. I don't want anyone on this board to think that this is not the only thing that would be cut. I mean, there are teachers that are, I mean, like, there's staff issues.
100%. I wouldn't call this the roadmap. The counter that I have of what we're looking at is the disproportionality to the attack on the surplus. If we'd be cutting these jobs to keep them, where would those funds be coming from?
Let me just clarify one thing, just because I'm confused.
Yeah.
The scenarios that you have are additional cuts in order to reduce the tax levy. And if we're looking to maximize the tax levy, these items on this page are still in the budget.
Repeat that one more time.
Maybe that's the confusion I have about what.
So with a tax levy of 7.55, if the board were to consider trying to reduce it from 7.55 to 5.55, these are additional items that would be reduced out of the budget that are in the budget today that would be reduced in order to get the tax levy down to 5.5. And then likewise, the next column, same thing. Things that are in the budget today that, okay, we're on something.
But I guess my problem with question with that is because of this, again, we get to a lot of topics that folks may not be aware of, but I keep honing in on the long-term health of the school. We talk about the $500,000 surplus act. Isn't there an argument to be made that every dollar that we save, we put into attacking that surplus dependency? I guess my argument is this isn't a dollar for dollar comparison. If we lose some of these, or let's say we add them, again, I think there's a communication issue with how this is shifted. But everything that we lose, any position that we lose, those funds should be attributed to the surplus problem and not adding in more staff or keeping specific staff. So even if we went for what was being presented here in this levy scenario, say we dropped and went, we'll make it 5.55 or 3.33, the tax levy. What's being ignored is the surplus problem when we're talking about these things. There's a case to be made to eliminate, and I hate to say it out loud, more services, more jobs, in order to clear out our surplus dependency. Am I wrong on that? Because right now, the plan currently has us attacking, out of the 500,000 surplus problem that we have, we're now only attacking 43% of it. Am I wrong on that?
43%. We're reducing the amount of contribution from the budgeted surplus by 43%, so that we don't rely on surplus that's not going to be around maybe next year for us to continue with the incurring costs.
That surplus through spending freezes or holding off in order to get the amount that we need for the following year. Is that accurate?
I didn't really how it was said. Maybe you said it the right way, but you don't want to, I don't think you could sustain a $520,000 contribution from surplus, because I don't think you're going to have that this year possibly. So you can't maintain that. So you want to reduce your contribution from surplus into the budget so that you can then sustain a recurring cost in the future.
That has been $500,000+. Prior to that, it was prior to 2 years ago, where did the $500,000 surplus? Were you spending reserves? Were you using capital? All of a sudden, better way of saying it, you arrived here and fixed whatever was going on and made the surplus thing to legal, like we did when running the surplus the right way. That didn't just appear to you when you came here, right?
I don't know. when I got here that year, the 23 year, the end, fiscal year 23 that ended, there was almost zero breakage that rolled over
That's right.
to the new year.
Was a lot of that money applied to reserves, or was there just no money?
So we spent everything we budgeted.
I guess what I'm saying to the team is, I understand, no matter what, we're going to have to make large service and personnel cuts. I'm just saying it out loud. And if we dial back how much staff that we're keeping, we should either invest in. If we're dialing back the amount of staff to save funds, whatever overages that we get should be applied back into education, right? Educational positions, or applied to the surplus. So we're addressing the long-term problem. When I first sat down in January, the plan was to eliminate the surplus necessity, essentially, in the mathematics as the year went on, the reality of it. That went to addressing half of it. Now we're addressing 40% of it. In conversations as they continue, that amount should be going up. The amount that we're investing to break the surplus should be going up, not down. And that's when, so for the conversations that we're having, that's the problem I'm seeing. Yeah, I want to keep staff 100%, but it's not just balancing the budget with service and staffing cuts. We also have to address the underlying surplus problem. And to me, just talking as an individual, the surplus problem is the biggest problem that the school has. And transferring it from being 520,000 to now being 300,000, that's, to me, when I'm talking about long-term finances, that's not a long-term solution. We don't have the ability to attack that again when it comes to raising the tax levies outside of the chapter 44 stuff you're talking about. So my point is, I'm just saying it out loud, one of two things should happen to whatever capital we end up having off of this plan. We reinvest to bring in more education, bring back educational staff and services that we're paying, or it should be applied to shrinking the surplus. I think you're the one person who knows what I'm saying. Does that make sense? What I'm proposing there?
I'm again not following.
Can I jump into restart, not restart, but jump off of the conversations and what I brought up and what I wanted to have a conversation about is, we'll look at this piece of paper, it shows 7.55 and decreasing amounts from there. In reality, if we're going to talk about any percentage of the Chapter 44 funding coming back into our budget, if we want to talk about 100% of it, there's another column here on your paper that you don't see right now that says 9.387, 9.39 essentially. Matt's not wrong in his discussion of how do we want to spend that money? Should we spend it to offset surplus reliance, or should we spend it in bringing back roles? That's an absolutely valid conversation. But I do want to just make sure everybody else is on the same page as I, with where I wanted to start this conversation and why I want to have it, because we will either use somewhere between the 7.55 and the 9.39 this year, or we'll carry an amount over to next year, and it's available next year. I want to have that intentional conversation. 9.39 is a big number, 7.55 is a big number, but we have big discussions that have to be had tonight. And I wanted to, everyone, draw a line in your mind, and do keep in mind as we have conversations tonight, there's another column here and it goes up to 9.39 out of this year.
So we want to expand the data from the minimum that we have now to the new anticipated higher tax increase, so we can see more fully anything that, because this is not the full list of reductions. There's X, Y, and Z in addition to these.
Yeah.
And so what she's asking is to add another column here that lists in what reductions X, Y, and Z we would not have to make if we went even higher than 7.55.
To jump into the conversation, my point, and this is my personal opinion of things, right? If there's any money left on the table, we bring back education staff or we pay down the surplus. Those are the only two options. That's, again, my opinion when you're talking about we cannot continue to exist with a dependency year over year. We have to zero out the budget. That way, whoever, hopefully while you're still with us, or whoever the next person has the ability to go left and right on these books. Because right now, you are so on a track that you have to follow, and that's even at 300,000 on the surplus. That's my opinion. We may disagree. But the downstream effects to what that's doing to the reserves for the school. That's my point I'm talking about. It's not just personnel, it's not just service. There is, our savings account is essentially completely drained out. And we need $300,000 a year to make it make sense.
Well, it's not, no, our savings account is not drained out, and this is something that we discussed during the committee meeting. While we see plots that we utilized, the numbers on top of my head, like 700,000 and 500,000 and 300,000 over the past 3 years of our reserves. The way Mark explained it is those aren't a line, that's not a line of how much we're going to have to anticipate pulling that out of reserves, because he's done the work to decentralize the budget. So we can more accurately anticipate what the costs are going to be and not have to dip into surplus, correct?
Okay, that's a great point.
Correct, right, is that correct?
Correct. The district, you never, I don't want to say it that way. There's nothing wrong with using surplus year after year after year. It's the dollar amount that it reached. Last year, 520,000. We had a list up there that if we were to reduce the tax levy, we would have to do, I forget the list, but you get what I'm saying. There was a bunch of cuts that we were going to do. We said, no, let's delay the problem for 1 year. Dr. Diaz left, but he was going to work on trying to figure out what could be reduced. And when he left, it caused more of an issue for us to figure it out. But we are reducing it from 520,000 to 300,000, which I think is sustainable for the upcoming year.
For
And
the upcoming year, not for the long-term health of the schools, my point.
surplus will fluctuate year after year. You can't end the year in a deficit, so therefore there'll be something that gets added back.
Sure.
And as I track for everyone, the projected surplus on that sheet in my finance committee, it looks like we're not, that 300,000 will not hurt us long term.
So I guess if that's not a graphed line of the reserve use, right? The downward effect to the reserves that we have is close to $2 million use in over somewhere around 4 years worth of period of time. That is, I guess my point to you is that's a track down. That's a step down. We went from 1 point, I don't want to dig and make the conversation fun, but we went from 2 point something down to now that we're at
2.7 million a couple of years back?
Yes.
You don't even a $9 million budget. That's, I don't know where the number came from, but you'd impressed me to show me that.
Oh, no, I'll definitely show you. I'm not making that up. Over the past 4 years, there was a decline of capital and maintenance reserves up to $1.8 million.
Including capital and maintenance.
Correct.
Okay,
But again, my point is that we had those in the coffers, we had those in our back pocket. Now we're sitting on somewhere between 400,000, 600,000 in capital reserves.
So Matt, what would you consider a healthy reserve every
I'm so new, that's not for me to say, but I'm telling you, having less than 10% of our budget, our yearly budget, what we currently have in reserves couldn't get us through a month. Not that that's what it's applied to, but you understand, with no referendums for bonds and money coming in, like the big bonds, the prior one that we have, there is no room for them to moving forward when it comes to the reserve. So again, I don't want to go on too long, but my point of it is that we're not just talking about staff, we're not just talking about services, we're talking about surplus and reserves as well. And before we started discussing bringing in more staff or changing things around, I just want everyone to understand that I don't consider having to have $300,000 at the end of the year to be a balanced budget for the long term of things, especially when you're talking about what Caroline presented, which is outstanding. It totally makes sense. But that's my end. I just wanted to make sure that we're considering teachers and the long-term health of the school.
and just for clarification, a conservative projection for all the reserves is $1,060,000.
The last one we got at the meeting with, oh, you're talking about at the end of this year that's cashed in. The last material that I read was 600 in capital and 27,000 in maintenance.
I'm sorry. A healthy reserve budget looks like what, did you say?
The surplus that you could use to fund the general expenditures, the capital reserves, which only can be used for capital items,
Right.
and maintenance reserves that are specific for maintenance, comes to $1,060,000
Okay, combined.
combined.
And that's our current state? Or
That is my,
best
that is
guess at where
based
we
upon
should be?
today's numbers, a conservative projection as to what June 30th, 25 will look like.
And
On the reserves,
Matt, if you don't mind, I did want
Please,
to,
go ahead.
I wanted to pose Dr. Calabra's question to you, Mark. What does a healthy reserve budget look like? What does a healthy reserve budget look like?
for our sized organization right now, like, what would you like to see?
No less than 250,000.
Okay.
For the unassigned fund balance?
For the unassigned fund balance.
And what about capital reserves?
Capital reserves, how am I saying this? It benefits, there's pros and cons when you talk about the capital reserves. The more that you have in capital, give me an example. If we get a positive report from JCP&L, if we get a positive report where they're going to give us 75%, they already have said that 6 of our 10 units are past their useful life. If they were to give us 75% for that cost, and I don't want to make up a number, but you got to make up a number, we would have to come up with 25%. Saving money in capital reserves and building that up over the years would be able possibly to support the other 25%. Even if you, no, I was going to go wrong there. All right, yes, so you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And what else do you have besides the HVACs that you might have to replace coming in the next few years? I'm sorry?
That's an elevator.
There are other infrastructural things.
It was easy, it was too easy. I'm following you now.
Okay.
I am.
So to some, well, not summarize, but to say unassigned fund balance, we are projected to have 400,000 come June 30th. We feel comfortable that 200,000 is healthy and sustainable for a school our size.
250, I'd say, would be minimum.
Okay, and then capital reserves, we are projected to be at 610,000.
I'd like to see that grow.
Okay, and then maintenance reserve, we're projected to be at 48,000.
Maintenance is a little weird, but I'd say it'd be nicer to be closer to 75 to 100.
Okay. Okay.
But I just to bring the conversation full round.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. But
No, it all led to the same place. Does our current plan rebuild the reserves and shrink the surplus a proportional amount?
We're reducing the need for that 520 that is in this year's budget by bringing it down to 300, leaving the balance of a projection of 400. I think that's fine. Yes, I definitely, by the way, I can go to jail if I'm not mistaken, if I go put this district into.
No, I understand that,
It's a criminal act.
We have to like do the thing. I totally see it. And some of the questions that were answered, you can't give straight number answers of. And so I'll just say from my own opinion, I do not believe that 300,000 carrying over year in a university that, an institute this size is wise. Because you have to have that every year.
Right, but yeah, you want to reduce it more? Let me see, if I reduce it to 100, by 124,000, let's say we get back the whole entire chapter 44, I could reduce.
That's my point, yes, that's my point exactly. The money that we talked about, the additional bump should go towards keeping the staff or reducing that surplus.
Okay, now I understand what you.
That's I apologize, I'm new to this, so.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I just think the 300 can be sustained for this upcoming budget year, and therefore the 124, if it becomes available, could be used to bring something back that we're administratively looking at cutting. Now, mind you, 124,000, new teacher and a family health benefit package, you're there.
I wouldn't be opposed to it, just as long as it's going into educational, we're investing in education or paying our way out of, I'll call it debt, but that's not really what it is. I appreciate it, taking that.
So with that said, I'm maxing out for the next meeting. Okay. And I also want to remind everybody, as much as I don't like changes during the public hearing, at the public hearing, there's that last chance to make a change. So we'll submit it at the max and then we'll go from there.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and Mark, I'm hoping that we can have a lot of discussions tonight, so you're not having to do like last minute, down to the wire work next week. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, I think that's, for the resolution, I think that's all I needed. If we're not changing contributions from reserves, if we're doing the max, that's the resolution more or less.
Okay.
I guess the one question I have, Mark, on the changes to the manager account sheet, that's not public, was something we just discussed. Are the changes that you put on the meeting on Wednesday, are those getting carried on onto a spreadsheet for the state, or are we just voting for the overall levy numbers?
The board approves the tax levy to be assessed and any use of reserves and the use of the allowable adjustments that the state gives us, the enrollment adjustment, the healthcare adjustment, and bank cap.
So we're not discussing line item changes yet, we're just talking about how much money we're actually gonna ask the community for.
Correct.
That's a lot.
Correct.
All right.
Yes, I put this together just because there were multiple questions about it's hard for us to vote on a percentage when we have no idea what that means. So these are just scenarios, examples of where the funds could come from to put an item to a number.
It's a tough conversation to have right now because we can't cite what we're discussing and things that we're moving, we can't say any of that.
Everything's deliberative right now.
Understood, great. And I think everyone will get a bigger picture on the plan of things once we're able to say the reality of things out loud.
At the public hearing, everything is discussed in detail as to how we got to what we got.
Copy that.
Okay, moving on. Public comment. All comments should be directed to the board president. The board will not respond to complaints from and to school personnel unless the chain of command has been followed without satisfaction. Furthermore, the board cannot respond to any complaints from the public directed at any district employee or student, as the board must protect each employee's and each student's right to privacy. Those wishing to share comments during this portion of the meeting are asked to sign the register at the podium and state their name, place of residence, and group affiliation if applicable. Public comment shall be concise and to the point and shall not contain abusive, defamatory, or obscene language. Each speaker will be given up to 3 minutes.
My name is Elizabeth Basile, 16 Upper Kingtown. I'll begin by saying that I appreciate the Board of Ed listening to residents' concerns and needs and implementing the improvements and changes as a result. Specifically, moving the timing of the executive session and addressing the audio of the virtual Board of Ed meeting. It's a great start. I do have a few comments that I hope the board will be willing to expand upon. One, I know I had spoken to Carolyn about this through email. There's now 3 Facebook pages associated with Franklin School, so I'm just a little confused about it. There's different amounts of followers, there's different things, job postings on one, some Board of Ed stuff. So I'm just thinking I could send you the links and maybe you could figure out which Facebook page is going to be for Franklin School. Second thing is, I'm still really concerned whether it's the JCP&L energy audit or the H2M architect's plan. I hope the Board of Ed realizes that both companies' goal is to make money. It's my hope that the board utilizes other knowledgeable people and residents to assist with asking the right questions, pushing back on dollar amounts, as it may benefit the school's ability to save money and also use the bond money that you've already gotten for future additional capital improvement needs. 3, I was hoping you could explain from the agenda in more detail the preschool expansion budget aid and specifically what the dollar amount is, because it seemed very vague. 4, on the Franklin Township School Huntington Facebook page, I saw the posting for the School Business Administrative Board Secretary. I wanted to know if the Policy and Personnel Committee is currently working on that, as well as working on the search for the new superintendent, and what happens if no replacement for either role is found. 5, I wanted to know if that 5-year analysis that Carolyn was talking about is going to be provided for the community to review, because there's a lot of numbers, and at the next budget meeting for the public, we're not going to get enough information to actually even understand what's going on. You actually answered the March 17th question. Okay, also in the Policy and Personnel Committee, I had a thought, well, actually, I just wanted to ask a question. If that committee thought about sending out an e-blast regarding the need for substitute teachers to the whole Franklin, to all the Franklin residents, because there might be an existing pool of certified substitutes or retired teachers in the town that are not on the Franklin Facebook school pages. I also just wanted to get a clarification on the HCES, Huntington County Educational Services. I know there's a paraprofessional agreement, which Mark referenced, saying it's just out there in case you need it, but I wanted to understand if there is even a fee for using their services, and if that would be part of the budget. Let's see, where am I? Oh, there are a lot of good bullets in section 16 of the agenda and communications. I wanted to actually, and you spoke to it a little bit tonight, and the historical data for the past 5 years, but if we don't see it, the residents are not going to be like, yay, yay. So I think that if you can send that out, either through Christine Burke or on the school website, I think it would be just another way of sort of transparency. And that's it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sandra Marzo. We live on Pittstown Road. And I appreciate the lengthy discussion about the budget with all the details. And I appreciate that we have a board member who works in finance now. My husband works in finance. I mean, technically it's technology, but he's been in banking for his whole career. So I appreciate the details because I think it brings another perspective onto the board that we need. It's good having a wide variety of perspectives. I also want to say I'm glad to hear that you're reconsidering regionalization. I know the report itself was kind of like, but my kids got their education here in New Jersey, most of their education, here. But when I taught in a centralized school district where our district was the entire county, and where my father was a superintendent and spent his whole career was also centralized school district, entire county. So these tiny, tiny little districts just do not make sense to me. And I just, when I look at here versus where I worked, and there's just so much more benefit to organizing schools in bigger groupings for teacher development, your special education needs. And I know I've been hearing rumblings that it's coming down from the state eventually anyway. I know it'll be problematic because then school boards lots of them will have to go, and there'll probably be power struggles over that and over administrators to a degree because lots of superintendents will lose their jobs. But there are a lot of benefits to it too. And I know that one thing some people were saying over the regionalization, that they were concerned that the locals would not get the same voice over their schools, but that maybe the administrator of that school could have some regular talks with parents. And it's still ultimately up to the parents to be involved at school board meetings. I mean, look, there's not hardly anybody here, and my kids don't go here anymore. And I'm here. It's not that hard. That's my 2 cents.
Hi, just a general question or observation more so. Has anything changed? Oh, sorry, my name's Heather Brisby, 6 Quaker Ridge Court, sorry. Has anything changed this school year in regards to our cleaning standards here? Not me personally, but I know many families who have had their children have multiple illnesses this school year so far. So just a general observation or question. It just feels like it's been really heavy with illness this school year. I noticed that there's air purification systems in the hallways. Do those run generally? Is there a set schedule? When I've been in the building as a PTA member, I do not see them running. So just a general observation that I've seen and that I've heard from other families in the community. Just a huge uptick that I've noticed. So just wanted to bring it to the board's attention. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Okay, so to answer some of those questions, starting from the top, Ms. Basile, the Facebook pages, there should be 2 pages. So there's the board, because the board president can speak to board items, and there's the school, and the principal and the staff that mans the school, they can speak to their school items. So there should be 2 different ones. There's another one.
It might be the PTA one.
The PTA one as well.
It doesn't say PTA, it says, where it labels it says school, which is yours, the Board of Ed. Then it has Franklin Township TWP School Huntington, that comes under education. And then there's Franklin Township School, Quakertown, New Jersey, which is brand new, but it has all your logos, it has stuff posted, and it has, I think, and it has school there too, but.
Yeah, we had some technical issues with Facebook
Okay.
over the past few months, and so we'll take care of that one. Preschool expansion aid regarding the numbers, those are the numbers that we don't have solidified yet. They only gave us credit for 36 students, where we are expecting to have 39 students. Therefore, that created how many thousands?
No.
Now you can. The state funded us at 36 students. We're at 39, or it should have been 39. The state acknowledged that it should be 39, but they indicated any fix would occur. Any fix would occur if they occur after the tentative budget is submitted to the county office.
Okay, so the dollar amount for the extra 4, was it 3 students? You're hoping to make up.
We'll follow up in email, okay? Regarding the open positions, yes, policy and personnel, they are doing everything they need to do to ensure that we have all of the positions filled. 5-year analysis is something I need to speak with the board before we publish anything. That's why I didn't provide it for the public yet. Great idea to e-blast regarding the substitute teachers. We have had an uptick, which has helped recently, thank goodness. Hunterdon County ESC for paraprofessionals. There are sometimes right now we're hiring in-house, but there are sometimes where there are emergencies because of illnesses where we have to have that contract in place. And regarding the regionalization, yes, we agree. Coming from Senator Gopal's office, he does not believe that the state is going to under Murphy, that the state is going to force regionalization, but it kind of seems as if finances are going to do that themselves. Special ed is an enormous part for everybody's budget. And like you're saying, if our district has this type of special ed programming and District Y has this type of special ed programming, and this district has a different type of programming, then those 3 districts, if they regionalize, they would not have to spend the money to educate a student out of district. When you go out of district, that's when the costs skyrocket. I mean, we received the numbers for next year, and there's some tuition that's over $130,000 per student. Not transportation, not aid, $130,000 per student. And there's even some up to $150,000. So that would be something that we could look at as far as regionalization, or at least working with other like north sending districts. That's something Allison and I talked about with Union, trying to see how we could coordinate the special ed services that are provided amongst the different school districts. And regarding cleaning changes and deep cleanings,
I don't, Mark probably could this more than me, but I don't think we've done that. I can just tell you that we're not the only school district that this is occurring in. There's so much flu going around. And when I speak to other superintendents, they're all having the same problem of children being ill, staff being ill. Hopefully, with the spring coming soon, it will reduce the amount of illnesses that we have seen this year. You're right, it's been incredible this year.
okay, so moving on to finance and facilities. Yes.
I did look into this question about the school pages. There is one called Franklin Township School, Quakertown, New Jersey. If you look, there's 0 likes, 0 followers on that page. The confusing part is that it does appear someone's still posting to it, so we'll get that sorted out, I'm sure.
We'll delete that one. Okay, so for finance and facilities, our committee met on March 5th for a little bit over 2 hours. We spoke with our new capital project manager, Megan Burnham from H2M, and she provided updates on the capital projects. So for the site improvement, which is the parking lot, they are still researching the different permits that were issued in around 2008, 2010 regarding wetlands. For the bathroom renovations, which is also part of the nurse's office and the front office, things are moving along with that. And advertisement for the bid will be placed in the newspaper at the end of March. Hopefully, we will award a bid for that project at the May 5th board meeting. For the generator, H2M did a site visit on March 4th, and we provided multiple electric bills to help them start building the plans for the new generator. Local rec improvement for the track, we're just waiting for the ground to thaw out so we can break ground on the track. And JCP&L audit he spoke to, obviously the finance we spoke about. Budget development, so corporate sponsorship, again, I spoke to that. We are creating that program, working with our lawyers on how to bring in additional funds and stay compliant. Good news regarding the pilot program for the 55 and up community projected in Franklin outside of Walmart. We can petition the town to receive some of the funds from that. So I've gotten some good information on how we can potentially benefit from that in like the next 2 to 3 years. For budget development, do we want to continue the conversation or do we want to, have we exhausted that? As far as the percentage for next week, for the March 17th meeting? Okay. So can I get a motion for A through H?
For next week, or Monday, you said it's on, but I don't know. You said you want to put forth a 9 point whatever percent. That's what's going to show up in the resolution next week, and we're agreed to that?
Not the percentage, but the dollar amount. That will equate to.
That will equate to that percentage.
But will you prepare multiple resolutions so that we can choose from them?
I can do that.
Yeah,
That's what I was.
That's
Sorry, Mark.
not what it sounded like, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, it wasn't going.
No, I know.
Gotta be clarified.
I'll jump in on that. The only question I have is, are you going to be able to present a plan that keeps it at a 5% levy increase? Or are we now talking 7.5 and then the higher?
7.5 and the 9.3.
Those are the two options that are being presented.
Those will be the two resolutions, unless directed differently to bring it, to bring 5, 10.
No, I
Just
think
tell me
those
how
are the
you
two,
want
those are the two
and
that'll
what you
do it,
want.
yeah.
I'm just sorry.
You're sorry.
sorry.
I'm just thinking back to whenever that year was and we were figuring out the budget and the options. So it sounds like we were only gonna put up the 2 options for the 9 point something percent, 7 point something percent. I think it might, I don't want to make more work, but I feel like it might be good also to include one more so that really everybody can see what we're looking at and what the impacts could be.
Is anyone gonna vote? I'm not on either. There is no such thing as on. Do we have enough of a quorum who's gonna even vote on the things that are in column 2 right now? To even discuss lower than 7.55%?
If I may, Colleen,
I'm genuinely concerned
I'm
about
personally
the school's
not
ability
quite
to
sure
stay
that there's an
afloat at
option.
7.55.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump
Yeah,
in.
no,
I don't believe that there's an option to go lower by 7.
And I agree with that.
It's
I
just an
think
exercise.
for the community, especially when we're talking about such higher tax levy increases, you know, that they're aware of, okay, if we did do this, it's not gonna be a huge impact to your home, however, this is the impact it's going to have.
As an exercise, you're 100%. Yeah, no, I
think it's good for people to see.
To show it to the community, I agree, but the mathematics of it are, am I wrong on that, Mark? I mean, the only way to get to shrink it any more is to lay off more, yes?
We're hurting.
Yeah, okay, I just want, just so the community knows that like, there's not, this isn't gonna be a diner menu that you're gonna be able to present. It's going to be A or B. Tough decision, really tough decision. There's gonna be nothing easy about what we have to do. And I'm only saying that for, just so it's said out loud and we're all part of the realities here. There's no plan that you could put forward without eliminating all of the services and staff that would make this a 3% levy increase.
There's a lot of cuts to get it down to 7.5.
Just to get to 7.5. Okay, that's all I want to said out loud, that's all. Yeah, okay. Thank you, by the way.
So I guess my question is, at what point does the public see what those cuts are? I mean, we're not discussing them in detail now, but I feel like I'm hearing transparency and they should understand what cuts we even had to make to get it to that point. So
1,000%, Allison.
So I don't know what point we can do that.
It would be the 17th.
Usually the public hearing is in April. The board is approving a budget to go to the county office with a tax levy
Understood.
amount. And then a full presentation is at the public hearing. That's
At the risk of breaking the rules in front of our lawyer, I'm just saying, like, the sooner we can get that information out, I think the better we would all feel and the community would feel. But I'm not suggesting dates or anything. I agree with Allison. I think once that information's out there, people will have a real vision of what the issue is.
It's just, to me, it's kind of backwards, right? We approve a dollar amount, but don't say why.
Yes.
Until a month later.
There's nothing that says you can't say why.
Right.
All right? The board can ask us to provide whatever information you want at any time you want.
Yeah.
Everything up until this point, I think, should have been deliberative and, but at a point between now and the public hearing, I think that we need to really lay things out so it's straight.
But the public hearing is after we've already had the resolution for what the tax levy is going to be.
Correct. And then at the public hearing, you could modify what that tax levy is if the board so chose, and then we would resubmit the budget to the state with a modification to the tax levy.
Can we request you guys to say it right now?
Say what?
Say what cuts that we have to be making in order for the 7.5?
No.
Or are we, I'm just asking, I'm not
I think we have to
entirely
be
sure.
careful when we're talking about people's positions.
Then you said getting into the rice. Understood.
It's not even that they're not riced, it's, I want to make sure that we're all in agreement
Yeah, I don't want to.
on exactly
Right, I
what
don't wanna cause
those
any
decisions
unnecessary-
are.
Totally fair.
Yeah, I don't want to list,
Right.
I don't want to list roles and then we change them. We do have to, we do have to list those roles.
Are we
at
allowed
some
to
point.
give total numbers?
I'm just thinking.
Right, but I don't think we've ever had a discussion, and everybody correct me if I'm wrong, I don't feel like we've had a whole board discussion of the line items that are at stake. I mean, I've seen it in some minutes, I've seen it in some files certainly, but in terms of discussing what we actually want, don't want in the budget, I don't know if we've had it.
Changed from the
Mark, like you
27th
mentioned,
to
to
the
get to
9th
the-
that I was not expecting. So
You mentioned to get to the 755, there are significant cuts. I think if the community could get as much, as well as us, as much window into that next week as possible, obviously without any sort of rights considerations or anything like that, that would probably be helpful. Is that fair for next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I do want to agree with Allison, like at some point, we as a board have to have alignment on the roles that are going to go and the roles that are going to stay, because Dr. Calabro, very quickly following this decision, needs to start pulling contracts, looking at termination timelines, and deciding when she is going to notify people, when she's going to put things onto our agendas in April, in May, in June, and so forth. And if we are surprising her with, oh, we didn't talk about that in March and April as a board, what do you mean it's on the agenda to cut this role? Like, we have to make sure that you have the plan and that we are all settled on it so that it is the plan we're executing on.
I just want to make it clear, and Mark, you're here so you can verify this. The recommendations come from the superintendent, not me, the position of superintendent. So whatever cuts or whatever, those recommendations, when they go into the budget, this position says, this is what I'm recommending. The board can say, and we don't agree. This position can then go back and say, well, that's what I'm recommending. And if you don't go with it, you don't have a budget. Now, I don't think we'd ever go that far. But am I correct in that assumption? Okay. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that's the way it works. But never would I sit there and, try to tussle like that with you. But
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we, as a 7, are all in agreement with the plan so that you're not rehashing which position is going to go, which position is going to stay in May and in June and in July. We have to let you do the 9 million other things that you are doing. We have to be as close to the mark as possible and in agreement on this goes, this stays, so that you're not having to guess and play a guessing game on how we're going to vote all throughout the course of the next 3-4 months. I don't want to put that stress on you because we as a board didn't come together as a group of 7 and give a plan that we agreed with and that you agreed with. I'd rather set a plan and action on it.
And I think there's some growing pains here because the previous super didn't present things this way. The previous
That's an
super-
understatement of the year.
The previous super came to the board and essentially said, okay, board, you make the decisions. And so that's why,
that's not the way it's done.
that's why this board is saying, wait, because we're learning how
That's not
things
the
should
way
have
it's
been done.
I mean, certainly,
Yeah.
certainly I will work with you, but that's not the way it's done. This position, I have to say to me, that this position presents what recommendations on budget cuts or whatever that has to be done, staffing wise, brings it to the board, but then the board doesn't come back and say, well, we don't want this, we don't want that, because this position would say, well, then you don't have a budget, because this is what I'm recommending. I'm not gonna do that. I mean, we definitely have to work together on this. And as Mark said, there is no great solution to this. It's, every day I go into this, we have more money. Right? It's good.
Where's your money tree, Mark?
Because it's a, that, nobody wants to cut
So I
it.
think that's a really important point that Carolyn just made, because it has been like that over the last number of years, right? So if that's not the way it's supposed to be, I think it's a realignment on how it's supposed to be delivered. My only ask would be, because I heard the comment, there's a lot more than what we're seeing on this chart that was actually cut. Maybe more transparency, just so we could see comprehensively everything that you're recommending is cut. Not that we're going to challenge those cuts, but just so we have the full list of everything that was cut to get to those numbers. That would be the ask.
I have absolutely no problem with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, I did want to, and I'm glad Mark is here to verify that, because as I've been listening to the board over the number of weeks, I'm thinking, they got this backwards. And I just.
It's been backwards for a while.
The way it should be.
Yeah. And that's fine. I think everybody just needs all the pieces to see.
Everyone on this board, except for our new board member, has only operated in that other way. So
Yeah.
to your point, it is a bit of a growing pain. But that is why I said about next week, if you can provide some of those other things that really we're not talking about on this sheet, just because it gives context to what is in the conversation.
Just on the deep into the folders of things, Mark's budget manager accounts for Fund 11 gives a bit of a map at the very, very, very last page of it. That's where he starts talking about the real services and real, just so, I'm sure they'll send you something, just so you guys, when you're going home tonight, you have the ability to look at some of them. And they're a half a page long.
It's more, totally understood. It's more for like taking it down and presenting it this way.
Handing it out to them. Yeah, go, have at it.
No. I mean, that's why I'm asking that. Give us like bullet points and stuff.
No, you're on the committee with me. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Just for clarification, the purpose of. What you're asking for is so that we could communicate for the community.
Okay. And giving context to what we're talking about on this chart with like what different tax scenarios are, because the context is important that it's not just these numbers. There's already been so many things that have happened. These are.
Exactly. And the decision, the board has to make is not the menu of cuts. It's which level of cut are we talking to? And I think given the context of what level of cut we're talking to, what that means just helps us make sure we're making the right decision and also lets the public know why we're making that decision. So again, I don't want to go back to what we used to do because I don't think we should be reaching in at that level. It's just about the transparency of what we're deciding, what falls under what we're deciding. Yeah.
The way that just ends.
Okay, so can I get a motion to approve action items A through H under finance and facilities? Second? Okay, so for discussion, for H, paras through ESC, is that a similar rate, $30 an hour, as we are hiring in-house?
I did not make a calculation on that, and this is not, again, hiring. We are, I guess I understand your question more so now. I don't think we did a calculation on the two, but we're not anticipating using paras. We're hiring in-house, from what I understand. And this is just in case there's a need, we have the approval to use the commission to hire paras.
Okay.
Sorry, Mark. Specifically, we're not hiring a service to provide paras anymore. We're hiring our own in-house paras.
Correct.
Okay.
Can we get a roll call vote?
I just had one
Sorry.
question too. The CapEx project for the parking lot, did we put our H&M people in touch with the resident that had come to public comment once? He had been involved previously and had drawings and he was very knowledgeable. He's a neighbor. Did we put that person in touch with H&M?
I met with that neighbor, and he did not have any information regarding what we're looking for.
Okay.
If that's what you're asking.
Yeah. He seemed to have lots of information, so I didn't know if we just.
He had what we had.
Okay.
He was under the impression he had more, but when he looked through it, he didn't.
And he said he misstated, so what we heard was.
I just remembered him, so, thank you.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Cummins.
Yes.
Mrs. Frondorf.
Yes.
Mr. Giordano.
Yes.
Mrs. Luciano.
Yes.
Mr. Metz.
Yes.
Mr. Norton.
Yes.
Mrs. Luca.
Yes.
Passes.
Curriculum and education? Mr. Giordano?
Yes, we met on March 3rd. It was about a 45-minute meeting. Dr. Calabro and Aquino was in attendance. She had gone over some information, some challenges that she's given to the teachers as far as taking the NJSLA tests themselves, I believe, right, for their grade level. Book club for the teachers. Sorry, I'm bouncing around a little bit here. Went over some lesson plans and instructional objectives. And we did talk a little bit about the substitute shortage as well. One other thing was looking at NJSLA analysis and not using Linkit so much, if I'm not mistaken, right? Writing was one of our weaknesses. I believe we were short 4 paras, but I think there's 2 on the agenda, if I'm not mistaken, to be hired. And then we did clarify, to be a sub, it's 30 credits, not the 60 that was in change that the governor had made. So if there are parents out there that have some credits and, you know, want to be substitute, reach out to the administration. If I missed anything, please.
No, we did a good job.
Are those any college credits or educational credits?
Any credit.
Yeah, it has to be accredited.
And we were contacted by Sue Soloway, the county commissioner, to come read during Read Across America.
Yeah, I think Jen reached out to her.
Yeah, so I think our county commissioner came and read to some of the younger kids last week.
Question with the linkage, just because I know it's a very popular thing, and I've heard a lot about, so, what would be the benefit of that? Like, what was the?
Linkit aligns with NJSLA, and they provide us with the most current data. But what I was saying, and what Ms. Aquino was saying is, in order for kids to do well on the NJSLA, they need to see the format. Because a lot of times they know the answers, but not the way that the NJSLA presents it. So what we were saying is, give the kid, there's a lot of old data from NJSLA past, give the kids those problems, give the kids those writing samples, so that they can actually see, this is what it's gonna look like when I take this test. And we strongly encourage teachers to sit down and take it as well, so they can see what the kids are going through when they're taking these tests. That was our whole point. I mean, we're working really hard to bring these scores up, and I don't know what, because we don't have a lot of time, but we're doing all we can to do it, and teachers will be great.
Thank you.
Okay, so can we get a motion to approve items A through I in the curriculum and education?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
And a roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Cummins,
Yes.
Mrs. Frendel,
Yes.
Mr. General,
Yes.
thank you. Mrs. Luciano,
Yes.
Mr. Metz,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mrs. Levinko,
Yes.
passes.
Policy and personnel? Ms. Cummins?
Policy and personnel did meet this past month. We will meet again next month on April 1st, and that is not a joke. Matt and Shayna, we will be meeting on April 1st. We did get an update on the search for our anticipated opening of the supervisor of special services. Just as a reminder to everyone on the board, we currently have 2.5 days of support in that role through our shared services agreement. We are anticipating a full 5 days boots on the ground, opportunity to bring someone to fill in the other half of the week and really augment our current support. So if there needs to be any further discussion on that, we certainly can, and I would defer to Dr. Calabro. But I did want to call out that discussion and what we're hoping to see as a benefit to the students in the school as a result of that. Like we talked about in curriculum and education, we also covered our staffing concerns at the moment, the stress that it's putting on our current leadership team to navigate the management of the classrooms. And then we did get an update on J&B as we're moving to bring our paraprofessionals in-house and move away from our reliance on J&B for our paraprofessionals. Any questions, any concerns?
I did want to jump.
Excuse me, sir.
On the one topic, I just wanted to reiterate what you said about the search for special services. And Doctor, you'd stop me if I'm wrong. This has nothing to do with performance. It has more to do with making sure that that specific position has boots on the ground, sneakers on the ground 5 days a week. That's the only reason we're doing that. I just wanted to make sure that that was reiterated. It doesn't have to do with the budgeting. It has to do with one of our most important people being there, not sharing the service. We're trying to roll back the shared service. I'm just making, you said it, I just wanted to make sure that I put an explanation point on it.
Could you speak to what a certificated employee is, staff administrator is, and why the school needs them? When
Certificated,
yeah.
Well, you can't teach without a certificate.
But as far as administrators that you need.
You need to have an administrator certificate that the state prescribes what you need to do in order to get it. You can get a supervisor certificate, you can get a principal certificate. And there's all kinds of, if you go on the website, there's a whole list of certificates, recognized certificates that the state does, because sometimes we do titles and the state doesn't recognize it as a certificated title. So most of the time we get a master's degree and
we have to have one on campus at all times?
you should have a certificated administrator. Yeah.
Any other discussion regarding items A through K?
I might have a question. Sorry. I was just, and I apologize because I know I wasn't unable to be at the committee meeting. But with the paraprofessionals and not mentioning like switching them over, so can you just elaborate on that? Does that mean that like anybody we currently have contracted with ESC?
No,
J&B, sorry, J&B. We're moving to just have in-house paras.
Yes.
Okay, for all paras that are in.
We found, and I got a lot of feedback from the teachers, not just from the feedback. When they are our employees, there's more loyalty. And they feel like they're part of our community. And we have a choice of who we bring in. When you do an agency, they tell you who they're getting. And then you can say, we love them or we don't love them, and Catherine's shaking her head over there. Because it's
not in full support of that, and that was I agree, I think that was a great decision we made. How many paras are we looking at?
There was 4 more than we're hiring 2 tonight.
Okay.
Can you speak to the substitute need that we've had? That's an understatement for the community to understand why we're raising the
There have been some days, ladies and gentlemen, that we have pulled every available certificated body, including our secretary, who is a certificated teacher, to cover classes, because we just don't have this up. And we are not the only school district going through this. I mean, people in general in schools can't find subs. One of our problems is, it's wonderful, we're in a rural community, but we don't have a lot of things around us to draw from. We're not in a Newark or Jersey City where there's a lot more people. And we've gotten to the point that some days we should have closed school, because we've had our maintenance people take desks and chairs and combine 2 second grades, combine 2 third grades. Now, once in a while that does happen. But when it happens at the rate that it's happening right now, what makes me most upset is that our kids are not getting what they're supposed to be getting. They're not getting the instruction they're supposed to be getting. Not that the teachers don't do a good job, but now their class is doubled. And these students are not used to having a certain teacher. So there's a lot of complexity that goes into that. And we just couldn't find subs to cover. So I did go to the board and ask you, please increase our subgrades so that we are above 100 and counting. I've gotten a lot of great feedback. People have said, oh, great, I want to apply. It takes a while because the state of New Jersey says you need fingerprints, you need a tuberculin test, you need to do something. Their latest and greatest is called Pass the Trash. And what that means is you have to fill out a form and send it to every school district that you've been in for the past 20 years. They have to basically send back saying, you're not a pedophile. Essentially, that's what it's saying, or you haven't committed any crimes against kids. We have to get all those forms back. So all of this goes into the hiring process, which takes a while to do before we can actually put these people on the agenda.
I have a question on B. So,
What?
on B, item B, so the paraprofessional rate is gonna be the same as the sub rate, only when they're acting as substitutes? Is that?
Yeah.
And these are certified, they have their certificate, so
Not all
they
the
can be
paras.
subs?
Not all the paras will do, but we
Okay,
need
but the ones that have their certificate, they would get the same rate as a substitute, is that why that's pointed out?
the para substitute rate is the same as the teacher substitute rate. The salaries are not the same. It's just a substitute.
For when they're, that's what I'm saying, for when they're subbing,
correct.
that's my question. Okay.
And Jim, I just want to be clear. Were you asking when a para is acting as a sub? Or
Right.
when someone is subbing for a para?
No, when a para is acting as a sub is what my question was. That's why their pay rate is.
Is that
Except for other paras. They don't sub as a teacher unless they have the certificate as a teacher.
Okay, because
But
that's.
most of the time here, we need paras to cover a para.
That's my question, yeah.
So no, if I'm a
It's a
teacher, if
para
I'm a
sub.
teacher sub and you're a para sub,
Right.
then those are two different things,
So the
basically.
Para's getting the same rate as a substitute, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, a teacher
Yes, but the
substitute is
paras
gonna
are
get,
only covering for other paras that are out.
they're not
Yeah.
subbing for like a second grade teacher.
Yeah, got it,
Because especially if it's IEP driven, we have to make sure somebody's in there with that child.
right.
And that's been our biggest hurdle this year, was finding paras and finding subs. More discussion? Can I get motion for items A through K?
No,
So moved.
second.
Thank you. Voice vote, please. I mean, roll call
Roll
vote, please.
Everyone start yelling at me. Just kidding.
Ms. Cummins,
Yes.
Ms. Feinberg,
Yes.
Mr. Giordano,
Yes.
Mrs. Luciano,
Yes.
Mr. Metz,
Yes.
Mr. Norton,
Yes.
Mrs. Levinko,
Yes.
passes.
Thank you. Negotiations?
Yeah, so we met about 2 weeks ago, I guess. And our next meeting, as it says here, will be on March 21st. So we are in the middle of exchanging proposals.
Communications Committee met on February 19th, about an hour and a half. We discussed the Facebook page. We have asked to move executive session to make it as isolated as possible so that community members don't have to sit through like a halftime show. It's what it seems like.
It does sometimes.
Dr. Calabro has been sending communication to the township clerk about our board meetings and such, so we're going to continue that. Thank you to everyone involved who has made the live streaming of this possible, because I know it's not easy, but we appreciate it, and obviously the community members greatly appreciate it. Budget communication. So I would like to run this past the board regarding the tax levy and extraordinary expenses history, if everyone is okay distributing this. These are factual historical numbers to the public.
Sure.
Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. So I will have this for community members at the end of the meeting if you're interested, and we can distribute it as well.
Before we do that, just for your sake, because you prepared that?
Yes.
Yeah, for your safety. Those numbers probably should be validated, at least by like Mark or something, just so.
Well, he's the one who gave me the number.
Perfect, yeah.
Oh, no, I didn't
You
create
want to
the
just give it back to
information.
him just to double check
Yeah.
before we send it out?
Wait,
Double check.
so the sheet we're talking about giving out is the combined numbers or the percentage?
Just the tax
numbers that
levy.
Mark- I thought, Mark, you generated it, right? Yeah, yeah.
He generated.
generated, you
There's.
collated it. I got you.
Yes, I did not create this. I did not do the research. It's all on Mark.
Gotcha. All right, yeah, as long as we can just blame Mark, it's fine. That's right.
And,
Can I ask a question about this?
yes,
In addition to, at the end of the meeting, if it's available, where online can
we're
people
going to
find
post
it?
it.
On the school
Board of Ed,
website?
under the Board of Ed part.
We'll do it on Facebook, you think?
Yeah, we can do that too.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And our next communications meeting is March 12th. Township liaison, no. There's an illness.
We attended the first meeting of the month. We didn't go to the second. All very basic stuff. Nothing was discussed. A few things about a trail in the community, but nothing reflecting back on us. And I am not going to embarrass myself by trying to pronounce the name of the trail.
Kapalua.
Oh, like she said, easy for her to
Am I
say.
wrong?
I'm new, so yeah. That was it. There's all great people. They were all very welcoming to us.
Thank y'all for being present for us as our liaisons. Okay, regarding new business, I would like to start recognizing students at the meetings. Just some brainstorming. Unsung hero, who was just recognized across the county, our spelling bee winner, the students who helped organize and raise funds for the Because of Joey March Madness basketball fundraiser. Is everyone okay with bringing those next month so we can give them
And question,
recognition?
what happened, like the student delegates that used to attend?
Yeah.
We haven't had that.
Yeah, we haven't had that.
He's usually was like,
8th graders?
at least like 2 8th graders that would, yeah.
Should do that.
Start that.
I always enjoyed
We
that.
also used to let PTA speak at the very beginning of the meeting, giving a brief update if there was anything on the PTA they wanted to let us know. So maybe open that back up. I think she left, but, or Heather's here. But,
That's a cool idea.
yeah, they used to do it.
If they just send out one parent.
Yeah, just at the very beginning of the meeting, so they're not captive here.
Well
Add
said.
PTA to the agenda?
Yeah, it's very cool.
Absolutely. That's great.
They're usually here. I see them.
Absolutely. And then Hunter County ESC.
Yes, that was me also. It was a very brief meeting, my first time actually attending, and they basically went over their budget as well. They had to approve their budget. They did a small increase. They're fee-based. There's no tax basis, so no tax dollars go to their organization. They do charge a fee for any services that they provide. They'll hold the contract, so they'll charge some overage, and that's how they're funded. They were very welcoming. Basically, if we have any issues, they said that they've provided, obviously, paraprofessionals. They've even done an entire child study team at one point for a district that was in need. They do cooperative bidding and purchasing, and so it was good. It was nice to be a part of it. I'm not sure when the next meeting is. I'll keep an eye out and I'll report back, but yeah, it was very helpful.
And thank
They
you for
offer a ton of
providing
services,
the list
so-
of services.
Yep.
That's very
Yep.
helpful. So the whole school psychologists, social workers, LDTC, paras, speech, nursing, counseling, for subs and permanent, correct, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, they hold the contracts, so they're technically their employees, but yeah.
Perfect. Okay, and then last public comment. All comments should be directed to the board president. The board will not respond to complaints from and to school personnel unless the chain of command has been followed without satisfaction. Furthermore, the board cannot respond to any complaints from the public directed at any district employee or student, as the board must protect each employee's and each student's right to privacy. Those wishing to share comments during this portion of the meeting are asked to sign the register at the podium, state their name, place of residence, and group affiliation. Public comment shall be concise and to the point, should not contain abusive, defamatory, or obscene language. Each speaker will be given up to 3 minutes. Any takers?
Wait, sorry. I was gonna say. Elizabeth Basile, 16 Upper Kingstown. The March 17th meeting is here at 6:30, correct? Will you be sending out e-blast through Christine Burke? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Excuse me, it's been a while since I talked, sitting silent over here. So taxes, I think, are a touchy subject. John Tulin, 11 Pine Hill Road. So I think taxes can be a pretty touchy subject. I think taking a look at the long-term health of the school is really important as we're having and framing all these discussions. I look at it as, if the tax increase goes up a lot, you're talking $2,000 or $3,000 out of your pocket on an annual basis, right? If you don't invest in your school, the alternative is a $1 million home for round numbers. If you lose 20% of your house value because the school district goes, down the toilet, you're talking about a $200,000 loss when you go to sell your house when you're prepared to retire or whatever you're going to do with your money. But sorry. I think everybody's got to look at the long-term picture and not be caught up in what could be kind of ripping off the Band-Aid with a tax increase. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. So can we, motion to approve? Motion to approve the above executive session resolution for Franklin Township Board of Education adjourning to closed session due to legal, personnel, contractual, and negotiation matters. Wherein the length of time for the executive session is expected to be approximately 45 minutes, after which the meeting shall reconvene and proceed with business wherein action may be taken. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Seconded.
Okay. It is
8:33, 8:53.
Ready? Can I get a motion to reconvene at 9:44? So. Seconded. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All abstained? No. Okay, under other business, we have 7 resolutions, which I will read into the record. A, approval to cancel shared services agreement. Be it resolved that the Franklin Township Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, cancel the shared service agreement relating to the supervisor of special services position with the Union Township Board of Education, effective immediately starting the 60-day notice to the Union Township Board of Education. B, approval to cancel shared service agreement. Be it resolved that the Franklin Township Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, cancel the shared service agreement relating to the child study team secretary position with the Union Township Board of Education, effective immediately and starting the 60-day notice to the Union Township Board of Education. C, approval of human resource consultant. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools that the Franklin Township Board of Education enters into a contract with Cheryl Valletta, located at 52 Marlton Drive, Wayne, New Jersey, 07470, to provide consulting services to enhance the human resources processes, fix matters within the CDK personnel system, and establish standard operating procedures for human resources and agenda development effective immediately for not less than an average of 5 hours a day at $300 a day, not to exceed $24,000. D, approval of supervisor of special education. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools that the Franklin Township Board of Education approve the appointment of Lauren Rice Abramowitz as supervisor of special education at a salary of $125,000 per year, prorated effective May 13, 2025. E, acceptance of resignation. Be it resolved that the Franklin Township Board of Education, upon recommendation of the superintendent, accepts with regret the resignation of Phyllis Altieri, executive secretary to the chief school administrator, effective April 10, 2025. F, approval of additional sick days. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools that the Franklin Township Board of Education approve 5 additional sick days for employee number 2310. Due to an extensive illness, the employee has used all her accumulated sick time and is requesting 5 additional paid sick days. These days will be paid minus the cost of the daily substitute rate of $135. G, approval to submit change of use application to the state. Be it resolved upon the recommendation to the superintendent of schools that the Franklin Township Board of Education approves the submission for a change of use application to the state regarding the theater to be used also as a classroom for the 2024-2025 school year. Can I get a motion to vote on items A through G? So moved. Second? Seconded. And if I can get a roll call vote?
Ms. Cummings?
Yes.
Ms. Fargo?
Yes.
Mr. Giordano?
Yes.
Mrs. Luciano?
Yes.
Mr. Betts?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Luco?
Yes.
Yes.
Noteworthy dates, we will be having a special meeting regarding the budget on next Monday, March 17th, and the next regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting will be April 14, 2025. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?